Hello, and welcome to Season 12 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we watch the same movie on our own and then hop on a call to discuss it. This season, the theme is blatant pandering. We're going to review 10 movies that were either made in or set in the U.S. states that have downloaded the most episodes of The Horrific over the last few years. This will be a shorter season, so we may work in some listener recommendations and horror news along the way too. Thanks for listening. So, I've seen Deliverance before. I'm assuming you have too?
Mm-mm.
Oh, really?
No, I have.
Okay.
I lied.
So, but I had also only seen the TV version.
Oh.
So, one, a little more intense.
Yeah.
Certainly, especially one scene. Second of all, I hadn't really thought of this as a horror movie. And I guess it kind of is, but I got really, down a rabbit hole on figuring that out. Because I was like, okay, well, our big thing lately has been subgenres of horror.
Yeah.
So, where would you put this? I mean, I guess survival, maybe?
You should just message me, man, because this is not... I just put it on there because I wanted to watch Deliverance, if I'm being honest with you.
Okay. Well,
I mean, technically, I feel like this is just like Jaws, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I found a BBC article about it that says it is a superb example of the Southern Gothic meets backwoods horror narrative.
Hey, I'll accept it.
The Georgia wilderness is here depicted as a place set apart from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, the four vacationers are shown in contrast to the local people in virtually every conceivable way, blah, blah, blah. So I guess there is some precedent, but it just, in my mind, this was kind of a more thriller, adventure, survival movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you could I guess there is a place amongst the subgenres that you could fit this in. And there were certainly some horrific scenes. So,
well, yeah. I think the truth is, I knew picking this, that was the case. Even looking on IMDb, Yeah. But my thought tied to it was I don't know if I've ever been camping or watched people do bushcraft stuff on YouTube or whatever the case where you don't randomly hear listen for banjos that your warnings jokingly but
it was an absolute cultural phenomenon.
So it's it was one of those things where it's this this came out in 1972. It is still something that kids would say out in the woods, don't even know where it actually came from, but still say. So I was okay,
you got a real pretty mouth.
Yes, technically that's a urban legend or type situation. So it's throw it on there. Plus I just wanted to see it.
Yeah. So we are officially back on our grind for this season.
Yeah.
This movie is set in Georgia, and so we have a lot of downloads from Georgia, and that's why we're doing it. So yeah, the first thing in my notes was Georgia ? I always thought this was about Arkansas, and that is 100% the God's honest truth. I'm not just taking a shot.
I think it could just be placed in a few different states.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so anyway, today I learned. But yeah, I am excited to talk to you about this one. So I will do the introduction, and then you can share your fun facts, and then we will get into the dentally challenged details.
I like it.
In 1972, Warner Brothers brought us Deliverance, a survival thriller horror movie based on a book of the same name. This film tells the story of a group of friends who go on a canoe trip on a river in northern Georgia. Along the way, they must fight for survival against the worst of both nature and human impulse. Deliverance was made on a budget of $2 million and made over $46 million at the box office, which doesn't sound like much, but it was the fifth highest grossing film of 1972 in the U.S. It has gone on to have a lot of cultural significance and a cult following. It can currently be streamed on Netflix. What did you learn about this movie?
So this, like you were saying, filming takes place in Georgia and also North and South Carolina. Didn't want to forget those states. So in this film, they come up on a band, like it looks like a rundown house with a lady sitting in there, and she's like crocheting or something, whatever. Like that's legit. Like that's all real. As in, they saw that those people were living there. It wasn't a setup. Basically, like literally peering through the window with a camera.
The 70s were a different time.
Yes, they were. So, something to kind of talk about with this, I just thought this was interesting. Something I read about was kind of commenting on the notorious inbreeding in, Appalachia communities. Like, that's not uncommon. Like, there's even like a YouTube channel out there, I think it's called like White Soft Underbelly or something, and like there's like a current family that is descendants of that. One of the reasons, though, I was reading about, it was talking about white people who married Native Americans. So they were ostracized by both Native Americans and whites, and so in turn, stayed within the community, I guess I should say. Without getting too, everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, intermarried.
Yeah, I just thought that was like interesting though, because I didn't really, obviously, haven't ever done research on something like this. I've never been interested to know about this. Yeah. But it was just like, oh, that actually, like, considering like how narrow-minded we as humans still are today, that makes absolute sense of like being ostracized from both sides, of the course. And then it got me thinking, does this happen to all? Or, because I'm part Caucasian and part Native American, and my family tree goes straight up.
You married white?
No limbs.
My wife's from Arkansas, so there's bound to be some incest in ours. That's just kind of how it goes.
We all might be related. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Like as far as I don't think that's justifying any of that crazy stuff, but just interesting where it came from.
Yeah.
So the directors in this talked about how there were no stunt doubles used. Technically, there was one. I don't remember exactly which scene. It might be in my notes. But basically, the directors were like, if the shot is dangerous enough to need a stuntman, you shouldn't be doing it in the location, where they're at. You know what I mean? And it was like, they said that there was like a tough, like one split exception shot. Oh, it's literally still in my notes. A double for John Voight when he got injured when their canoe collapsed. There was one for that, but other than that, I've always read that or heard about how Burt Reynolds like always wanted to like do his own stunts. So I just assumed when I was reading this, I was like, oh, it's probably Burt just being like, oh, I can do this.
I feel like this character was like peak Burt Reynolds. Like this character was Burt Reynolds playing the person he wants to be, Well, and it's interesting because I feel like this is the start of that. Mm-hmm. So this is like this is like that role. Him discovering because like that was another thing I was reading about was it was talking about how like even casting Burt, I guess he was in like a few failed like TV shows or something at this point, or was just a TV artist or something, a small screen, and there was like question of like, can he do it kind of thing. It was like, my thinking is like, well, it's Burt Reynolds, like that. This is made for it. Well, they didn't know at the time, but anyway, so continue on with the stunt. So the director commented. Basically saying that one of the guys who fell in the water was holding his breath, or I'm sorry, the guy who was shot by Burt Reynolds. The one who said "squeal like a pig." Yeah. He legit held his breath for like, I think they said like at one point he
he kept holding his breath, not moving. Obviously, no CGI. People thought that, they're cynical. They think that there's, something was done on the computer or, something to stop it. But no, like, he held his breath, I think, like, at one time for like 2 minutes.
Dang.
Not moving to make it seem, so real,
Yeah.
So it's just, like, I feel like that's some hard work. Okay, so this is written, or based off a book written by James Dickey. James Dickey was actually the sheriff in this film, but he was trying to be there for, like, the whole thing, and, like, really kind of making life difficult for this film. He actually ended up getting kicked off set after a brawl with the director, but then came back and still did his role towards the end of the film, because, like, this film was not 100%, but, like, filmed chronologically as much as they could. And so I just thought it was kind of funny, because it was like, yeah, he got kicked off, and then he's like, fine, I'll still act, though. I still want to do I still want my scenes, So while the director John Boorman may have appreciated the cinematic potential of Deliverance, his own vision of the materials didn't always line up with that of author James Dickey. The two men came to have difficult relationship throughout production with Dickey. James Dickey was supposedly a heavy drinker and had a cantankerous personality, which is what I think people say about me. Frequently challenging Boorman, the director, over deviations from the script. So that'll get you punched in the 70s. Just saying. Last one. Dickey was said to be particularly enraged. It's hard to say that with the stuff he knows. Dickey was said to be particularly enraged when the first 19 pages of his screenplay were cut. Eventually, he and the director, Boorman, got into a full-on fist fight in which the writer is said to have broken the director's nose and knocked out 4 of his teeth. After this, Dickey was finally kicked off the set, only allowed to be back briefly towards the end of the shoot for his cameo role as the sheriff. The bummer in this is I screwed up the last time we recorded and didn't do the right movie. And I had, like, more notes to this, and my foot slipped when I was pushing myself up, and I kicked the PC and lost all my notes. So I frustratingly recreated as many as I could remember, but there were so many good facts about this. I just recommend everyone go out, and if you're interested in this film, just do some reading on it. It's pretty interesting stuff. Nothing, like, crazy. I will say, like, the kid who plays dueling banjos, lived a relatively normal life. Still, like, didn't reprise his role, but, like, known as the guy who can play, or who was on Deliverance playing banjo, even though he didn't play in the film. But there's a ton of stuff about this. Just get out and check it out if you guys are interested.
Nice. Yeah, so it's interesting to me that you said there was a fight over getting rid of the first 19 pages of the script.
Yeah.
Because even though it was only an hour and 40 minutes long, this felt way longer. And one thing that we talk about a lot with horror movies is pace and managing the pace. And it's like horror as a genre is very dependent on pulling you in one way or another and building an intensity. And it's doing something very hard, which is making you, sitting comfortably in a movie theater seat or on your couch at home, have all the types of feelings that you normally spend all day, every day trying not to have. And so it's like this weird thing where using visuals and sound, it's trying to evoke a reaction in you. And I feel like people in general are very adaptable. And so when you do too much too fast, or you don't manage that experience well, you can get really numb and it stops being effective. And this movie, I feel like, peaked a little early and then that made it feel like the ending part just lasted like forever. But I also feel like this movie had a couple of central messages that it was trying to get across that were not necessarily horror. Like, I don't think the biggest goal of this movie was to scare you. I think it was to make you think through some like more philosophical topics, if you will.
Yeah. And, you know, to state again for the listeners, like, I knew going into this, not, you know, 100% horror, but like, I wanted to add this on there for when I'm saying, like, you know, I'm not in the ocean, so I'm not necessarily scared of Jaws, or I don't go to the, you know, ocean, or maybe vacation occasionally, whatever. But like the woods is like, I was just out at my dad's girlfriend's land, you know, like that's something that I can relate to. So I just wanted to throw it on there of like, hey, I get why people like these movies like Jaws, or like the one with the bear attack, or, you know, it's like the same similar ideas. And I 100% understand with this film, or at least I think with this film, that if you take out one particular scene, that's, you know, the most notorious scene of this film, you know, and say that they were just like killed or like tortured or something, it wouldn't probably be as well known as, you know, like a horror style film. Otherwise, it would just be like a normal action film. Yeah. That's the way I kind of see it. But I will say too, like with the 70s, you know, like say you throw in like Deer Hunter, like that is pretty intense of a film as well, but it's so long and so drawn out. Like, it's just like, it seemed like the 70s produced some really amazing films, but it seems like if you go back and watch them, it feels like they're like 5 hours long, every single one. Right. And I thought that with this initially, you know, cause, you know, I pay attention to the time where I'm like, oh, this is an hour and 48 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's easy. I was thinking 2.5 was what I was thinking. And it was that, and I was like, oh, that's easy. Well, by the time it was done, even though I own this, I've seen it time after time, it was just like, whew, okay, we're finally done. Like, there was things that were dragged out a little bit, but it was just like, okay, at least we're done, you know. But I guess the added thing to that as well, I should mention, is, you know, are we going to get away from breaking this law or not? In which case, could be categorized as any action film, for the most part, of all time. So,
well, I feel like there was a certain amount of like psychological horror along with that, where it's like
not knowing what's coming.
They're realizing that they may have basically just become the killer. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of an interesting thing to me, because they're like very much trying to like justify their actions and figure out, you know, what are we going to say when we get back? And now that it went from this feeling of being hunted on the river to now we've made it out, but now we're worried that we're like we're on their turf, and we did something worth punishing. What's going to happen? And so like it was just kind of a weird way of like flipping that. Oh, we're the prey, to now we're the hunter trying to get away with it. And that was a thing that I guess I hadn't appreciated as much when I'd watched it before. That just from like a psychological perspective, that moment when they're realizing, oh, we might be the bad guys, was just like really intense.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think I was also pretty thankful even for that scene where like, you know, because like part of you is also super frustrated as well. Cause like, you know, if you put yourself in their shoes, you're like, should we be negotiating what to do? Or like, should we allow the victim who was traumatized in this situation, like a vote? Yeah, like their voice absolutely counts, but it's like they're not in the right mindset right now for like how we should be dealing with this body, you know? And it's just like this whole weird kind of mind game where like, you know, putting yourself in those shoes, and it's like, well, if that happened to one of my homies, like, I would, my response would be like, whatever you think. Like, I know I just said like, they're not thinking straight, but at the same time, it's like, but you just went through some heavy stuff, like for the rest of your life, this is going to be something you have to deal with. So what can help? So it's such it puts you in such one of those dilemmas. It's like hearing like those, like, you could make the train go on this track and kill one person, that means something to you, or 5 people that you don't know. And it's just one of those, like, get you thinking. So basically that's my explanation of exactly what you just said. Sorry.
No, it's all good stuff. I think that this movie was meant to be, like, psychologically interesting, like philosophically interesting, I guess. Because in the beginning, where it starts off and they're like debating the merits of damming up the river, and there's the viewpoint of, well, that's altering nature, it's changing things for humans, and that's somehow like morally or inherently wrong. And then the other part is like, well, it'll create a lot of clean power, it's a recreation area that people can go and enjoy, there's a lot of benefits that come from it. And just sort of that, like, debate over what's right versus wrong and morality and different viewpoints and all of that were things that just kind of pervaded through the whole movie. And I feel like a lot of it was just like a setup for Burt Reynolds to, like, say something that he thought was really profound. Like, sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can find anything. Or what was the other one? There's a lot of talk about how, like, civilization's going to fail and then it'll be survival time, and that's when people will really find out who they are. And it just
and I was like, Dad.
Yeah,
I love my dad,
but it felt like it leaned a little heavy into that stuff for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And this was one of the things that I had on my good notes opposed to my bad notes today. But it was talking about the 4 characters are supposed to be like 4 different thoughts of the same person, or in a way. Okay. So you have the confident Bert, you have the one who questions, or this, the sensitive side, which would have been Drew. I don't remember what Ned Beatty, his character, would have been. I think it was like the unknown, or the innocent, because like he was fresh to, or something. But there were like 4 different character, and like that's supposed to be the own thing. So I think you're onto something where, like, as much. Like, I am a Neanderthal, I know that, but like, so when I'm reading about this writer and like what the contents of what he wrote about, I wasn't thinking that way just because, like, I'm a Neanderthal. I was just thinking like, oh, this guy probably spent time out in the woods, just got into his head, met some crazy people, and came up with this story. But it's like, oh wait, or he could have been like an actual legit writer who like put actual thought into this, and this is going to be the confident guy, this is going to be the sensitive, this is going to be, or this is going to be the confident part of my brain, this is going to be the sensitive part of my brain, like all those thoughts. And so it's, at the end of the day, I never thought that our podcast about Deliverance would take us to this piece, but I'm so glad it did, because it's like, no, I think it's on to something, it's like, I didn't see that too much in my research about this, but I think it's, I think you're absolutely right, and there's more content to this than what it's given credit for.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and some of it, like I said, was a little, like, over the top. Like, I kind of rolled my eyes a few times at some of the lines, but it definitely was trying to get you thinking and, I guess, mentally involved, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's in how that was kind of tied into what I was saying was, like, even when I was telling you, like, whatever you want to do, I'm saying that because that's the Burt Reynolds part of my brain saying that. Realistically, I would be trying to make sure that you're taken care of. You go over, you relax, don't even deal with this. So like, it's just that part of your brain that's where, like, those stupid kind of comments come from, and they just found the perfect actor for that role, which was like Burt. I couldn't imagine, like, John Voight saying it and being like, I just don't believe it. But hear Burt Reynolds say it, you're like, yeah, no, you are a douchebag. Like, that's why you are saying this stupid shit. But like, I like him, so what can you do?
Yeah, definitely some memorable characters. One other thing I had in my notes, because like I said, I got a little obsessed with, like, trying to figure out the horror status of this movie. There were a couple of scenes that I thought were pretty effective as far as, like, practical effects and almost more like body horror. So when Bert broke his leg and like the flap of skin was just kind of hanging off, like that was so uncomfortable to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they found Drew's body and the way his arm was like broken and kind of wrapped around his head, that is an image that has really stuck with me since I watched this. Like it something about that, because it's a guy who was just like one of the friends, you know, and he was part of the group and going through all this stuff with them. And then all of a sudden you see just his like broken corpse there in the water, and just visually the way that was pulled off, I thought was really effective and disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was actually, so that, you know, one of the scenes with Drew where he's being shot, super sensitive guy, like that was the other.
Did he get shot?
Well, see, that's the thing. That was set up intentionally by the director. So, when I was struggling earlier in my facts, like they wanted it to be ambiguous.
Yeah.
So they wanted, did he get shot? Did he give up? Because like he just went against, like he was the one fighting to like, no, we can get past this. Like, well, let's not lose. Let's not become the bad guys kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, or did he throw him, you know, so did he throw himself in despair? Like he didn't have any heart to go on. He was complicit to murder. Was it the mountain man's companion shooting him? Like for that scene, the shooting was done on parts of the river where there, you know, were no dams, so the water couldn't be stopped and then released. And it was just one of those where it just kind of basically like, let's leave it up to the viewers.
Yeah.
Which technically I think is a little bit ahead of its time. However, not that great coming from the viewer's perspective. Because even though I've watched it 1,000 times, it's like, you had no, like, you were just, like, are you going to trust Burt Reynolds saying that he, or, you know, I think it was Burt and Ned Beatty's character saying, like, no, there was we saw someone. It's like, did you, though? You know, it was just so much. And, yeah, so that was on purpose. However, I will say, it's also easy to say after the fact, like, oh, no, I did that on purpose. Mm-hmm. Like, I want you to think about that, you know, so take it for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one, like I said, watching it, the things that really stood out to me was realizing that I had never seen the like cable version, and it got a lot more intense in a couple of spots. And then also this movie really was trying to, I feel like, be like philosophically and psychologically interesting. Those were the things that I had maybe not picked up on as much when I had watched it before. Yeah. So yeah, it is one that even, I mean, cause it's been probably 10 years since the last time I saw it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it definitely has held up as far as like the cultural relevance. It's something that people are still familiar with and it's had a lot of influence, but also is still like interesting to watch. Like, it definitely kept my attention and it got me thinking about a lot of things. It felt long, but it was kind of dense as well.
No, yeah, and you know, not to be a dead horse, but I do think that some people do watch this and just watch it face value what it's worth. But like the other thing to take effect is like the whole, you know, burying a city kind of thing, you know, like for the dam. So it's the whole film is just heavy with like, what do they call, like what I was talking about with the train situation, like just the film is just heavy with like, are they doing the right thing or not? And
like good, like morality debates.
Yes. It's like the whole thing is just a morality debate. The whole entire film. And, you know, which it took watching this for the podcast to realize, like the exact same thing, like what you were saying for you is the same for me, where like I watched this 1,000 times. I'm sure the first time I watched it was because some, you know, friend told me about, you know, the scene that you gotta watch is super messed up. But now it's like, oh no, there's like a lot of like moral debate going on in this film. Yeah. So hats off to old James Dickey, you old drunk bastard.
And hats off to all of our listeners in Georgia who I'm sure don't feel like this is the most flattering portrayal of their state. But to be fair, for many, many years, I've given Georgia like such a benefit of the doubt because I just thought this was all in Arkansas.
I think that might be insulting Georgia. Or did I just insult Arkansas? If we're doing terrible at this.
That is the moral debate of the episode.
Yeah.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
And then we can dive into the fucking details.
So happy. I've never been this happy in my entire life. This is the happiest day of my life.